The grand lobby of the Crestwood Elite Hotel shimmered under the golden afternoon sunlight, casting intricate shadows across the smooth, gleaming marble floors. Evelyn Sinclair walked through the space she had meticulously designed, her heels clicking softly as they echoed in the vast room. But today she wasn't walking alone. Beside her, Michael Reed moved with calculated precision, a step behind her, his hand gently resting at the small of her back, guiding her with a silent command, as though leading her in a delicate waltz. Beneath the tailored black suit, he wore something cold and hard-pressed against her spine, a weapon. Evelyn didn't need to be told the rules. She knew them by heart. No sudden moves, no screams, no reaching for her phone. She understood the stakes without a word being spoken. As they passed a janitor scrubbing the floor near the concierge desk, Evelyn made her move. With a swift motion, her hand subtly dropped to her side, her fingers forming deliberate shapes in the air in the briefest of moments. "Help me. He has a weapon." The janitor's mop paused for a fraction of a second, a small pool of water gathering at his feet, but his gaze remained fixed on the ground, never meeting hers. Ivan Grayson had learned long ago that invisible people notice everything. For 5 years he had worked the early shift at Crestwood Elite, pushing his cleaning cart through the hallways and lobbies, scrubbing floors that guests trampled over without a second thought. Every scuff mark, every coffee spill, every piece of dust told a story. To the world, Ivan was invisible, but to him, the hotel was alive with secrets. The real reason Ivan observed everything wasn't just the job, it was his daughter, Lily. She was 7 with wild brown curls that never stayed put, and a smile that could light up the darkest room, though she couldn't hear it. Born deaf, Lily had shown Ivan a world beyond sound, a world where every gesture, every look, and every reflection carried meaning. When your child can't hear her name, you learn to understand the world through the quiet movements of hands, shadows, and echoes. Every morning before his shift, Ivan dropped Lily off at the special education school 3 blocks away. They had their own language, a blend of sign language and personal gestures that only they understood. A soft tap on the wrist meant pay attention. A quick tug on the earlobe meant, I love you. A hand over the heart meant, you're safe. Sometimes well-meaning strangers offered pity, but Ivan had long stopped trying to educate them. Lily didn't need their sympathy. She needed a father who showed up every day, who learned her language, who kept the world safe for her. That morning had been different. Ivan received a special assignment from the hotel manager, but there was something about it that felt off. The VIP wing needed to be spotless, and every maintenance worker was instructed to move quickly, silently, and without questions. Ivan had noticed Sarah Mitchell, the head of security, pacing in the lobby more than usual, adjusting her earpiece repeatedly. Then there was Nadia, the senior receptionist, who had pulled Ivan aside near the elevators, her voice low. "We've got a special situation today. Just keep your head down and make sure nothing goes wrong." Evelyn Sinclair had built her empire on the principle of control. Crestwood Elite was the crown jewel of a chain of high-end hotels that spanned 5 cities. She had inherited the wealth, but it was her strategic mind that transformed a collection of outdated buildings into luxury destinations. She could read financial reports like novels and could predict the downfall of any failing investment 3 years before it happened. But today, for the first time, Evelyn wasn't in control. Michael Reed had approached her that morning, emerging from the shadows of a side alley in the parking garage. His suit was impeccable, his voice calm and measured, and in his hand he held a gun with a chilling confidence. He spoke with an unsettling calm, explaining the situation. They were going to walk into her hotel together. Evelyn was to smile at her employees, and if she reached for her phone or signaled security in any way, people would die. The gun pressing into her back was a constant reminder of the stakes. Michael guided her through the lobby, deliberately choosing routes that kept them out of view of the cameras, positioning himself so that anyone who glanced their way would see a businesswoman and her associate, nothing more. His objective was clear and devastating. Inside his briefcase was a contract. If Evelyn signed it, she would transfer control of Crestwood Elite to a shell corporation. The terms were simple but brutal. Her name would be on the line, and once the contract was signed, she would lose everything. But Evelyn had one advantage Michael hadn't anticipated. 3 years earlier, Evelyn had funded a program for deaf children, providing scholarships and equipment. During the program's launch, she had attended classes watching the students and teachers communicate with their hands with their entire bodies. The experience had moved her deeply, and she had enrolled in a basic sign language course, learning enough to greet students and understand simple conversations. She never thought that this skill would become a lifeline. As she walked past the janitor near the concierge desk, Evelyn made a decision in the blink of an eye. The man was hunched over his mop, but she could see his reflection in the polished marble floor. More importantly, she recognized him. Ivan always arrived early, dropped off his daughter at the nearby school, and sometimes practiced his sign language in the break room. If anyone could read her silent plea, it would be him. With careful precision, Evelyn's fingers moved, signaling, "Help me. He has a weapon. Don't look up." She kept walking, her face steady, her breathing measured. Behind her, the sound of water splashing against the tile floor told her Ivan had resumed his work, but this time, he moved slower, more deliberately. Ivan's heart raced as he watched the reflection in the marble, his mind quickly processing what he had just seen. The CEO had signed to him, "Help me, he has a weapon." Ivan's first instinct was to look up, but the last part of the gesture was clear. Don't look up. He kept mopping each stroke, deliberate his pulse, hammering in his chest. If he screamed for help, Michael might panic and pull the trigger. If he ran for security, Evelyn would be left alone with the armed man. If he did nothing, the weight of inaction would haunt him forever. He had seconds to decide. He thought of Lily waiting for him after school, of the promise he had made to her mother to keep their daughter safe, to come home every night. But he also thought of the promise he had made to himself, never stand by while someone suffers. Ivan set down his mop and grabbed the yellow caution sign. He walked toward the VIP elevators, positioning the sign right in Michael and Evelyn's path. A small delay, 30 seconds, enough to get to the supply closet phone without being seen. Ivan Grayson continued his meticulous work, his mind racing. It had been years since he felt a sense of urgency, this intense years since he had been so deeply involved in something that could change lives, not just his own, but someone else's. But here he was pushing a cleaning cart down the hallway of a 5-star hotel, pretending to be the same invisible janitor he had been for years. Yet today the hotel which he had walked through countless times felt different. The quiet hum of the air conditioning, the distant voices of guests, and the soft chime of an elevator bell, none of these details went unnoticed by Ivan. He had spent so many years cleaning, watching, listening, that now everything seemed to stand out, even the faintest of sounds. As he moved through the lobby, his mind flickered back to the moment when Evelyn Sinclair had signed to him the desperate plea in her fingers. She had needed him, and the world for once had stopped being invisible to him. His daughter Lily was the reason he had learned to see the world differently. When Lily was born deaf, Ivan had learned the language of silence, a language of gestures and expressions that spoke louder than words. He could communicate with her, understand her needs, her emotions, her laughter, all without a single sound. But today, it wasn't just Lily's world Ivan was navigating, it was Evelyn's, and hers was a world of power and control. The fact that someone like Evelyn, someone who commanded luxury and influence, would need his help was almost surreal. It wasn't lost on him that the same woman who had transformed a simple hotel chain into a global empire was now walking through her own creation under duress. A gun pressed against her back, a contract dangling above her head like the sword of Damocles. Ivan had to act. But how and when? The building he thought was his to protect, not just as a janitor, but as someone who knew its rhythms, its faults, its secret corners. And the corner he was heading toward, now the VIP wing, held far more than just the polished floors and grand decor that guests admired. It held danger, and Ivan was determined to stop it. He reached the supply closet, and without hesitation grabbed the phone on the wall. The sound of the line ringing felt deafening in his ears as he waited, every second stretching out like an eternity. When Audrey Finn, the head of security, answered, her voice came through, clearly steady and composed. "This is Ivan. I'm on the VIP floor. I need you to watch the cameras closely. The CEO is in danger. The man with her has a weapon." There was a pause, and then Audrey's response came quickly, cold and precise. "I'm looking at the cameras now. I see them. Are you sure about the weapon?" Ivan nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "Yes. She signed to me, she told me he has a gun, and is forcing her to sign a contract. Stay on the line, Ivan. Don't hang up. I'm coordinating the response." The urgency in her voice sent a jolt through Ivan, but it also gave him hope. They weren't just going to watch, they were going to do something. And it wasn't just him now. Audrey, the police, everyone in the hotel was moving like gears in a well-oiled machine. "I need you to move slowly down the VIP hall," Audrey's voice crackled in his ear. "Create some legitimate delays. Keep it casual, but make it look like routine work. We need time to respond without alerting him." Ivan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his cart and pushed it slowly down the hallway, just as he had done hundreds of times before. The rhythm of his steps was calm, deliberate. The hall was quieter than usual, but Ivan was aware of every small detail: the flicker of a light overhead, the faint sound of Evelyn's heels clicking ahead of him, the slight shift in the air as the elevator doors opened down the hall. As he approached the elevator bank, he paused. A small problem barely noticeable, but it would buy precious time. He pressed the service button, then noticed a small issue with the panel, a slight misalignment that wouldn't stop the elevator, but would force anyone using it to call for assistance. It was a minor inconvenience, but enough to delay Leon and Evelyn. They'd have to choose between taking the service stairs or waiting for the elevator, and either way, that was time that Evelyn needed. Perfect, Ivan muttered to himself as he continued down the hall, keeping his movements casual, as if there was nothing unusual about his presence. He had done his job as a janitor for years, staying invisible, blending into the background. But today, that invisibility was his greatest asset. From his position, Ivan could see the reflections in the glass panel of the hallway. He could make out Leon and Evelyn approaching the elevator bank, and as they neared, Ivan subtly adjusted the elevator panel, making it appear even more like an accident. Leon pressed the button, his usual confidence faltering when nothing happened. A small sign on the panel indicated that the elevator was in maintenance mode. Ivan watched as Leon frowned, clearly irritated. The seconds dragged by. "Is this normal?" Leon asked, his eyes narrowing at the panel. Evelyn remained calm, her expression neutral. "Sometimes the system glitches," she replied. Leon seemed to take the explanation, but Ivan could tell something was off. The air between them felt charged. Leon's instincts were sharp, and though he couldn't put a finger on what was wrong, Ivan could feel the tension rising. "Let's take the service stairs," Leon ordered, his voice sharp. Ivan watched them turn toward the stairwell, moving swiftly with Leon's grip on Evelyn tightening just slightly. He moved quickly, now, keeping a steady pace as they did. As they passed, Ivan made eye contact with Bridget, the senior receptionist who had been waiting near the front desk. She gave him a silent nod, confirming the message she had sent to Audrey. He spoke quietly to her, ensuring she knew where they were headed. "He's taking her to the service stairs," Ivan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Audrey needs to know." Bridget didn't miss a beat. She turned immediately and walked to the main entrance where guests had just arrived, her voice carrying across the lobby as she casually engaged with them, keeping the atmosphere normal as if nothing was amiss. It was a small thing, but it would keep Leon's attention distracted, ensuring that the hotel still appeared like a well-run establishment. Everything had to appear normal. Until it wasn't. The service stairwell smelled of concrete and antiseptic, the stark contrast to the polished opulence of the floors above. Leon's grip on Evelyn's arm was firm, almost possessive, as he guided her through the utilitarian space. The air was thick with tension, the quiet punctuated only by their footsteps echoing off the walls. He had expected to walk into her office, sign the papers, and leave, but something about this hotel felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty. It was a feeling that gnawed at him, but he couldn't pinpoint why. He focused instead on the task at hand, forcing her to sign the contract. "You've built quite the empire, Miss Sinclair," Leon said, his voice low, cutting through the silence like a blade. "A pity it all comes down to this." He gestured toward the elevator bank, as they passed, his eyes sharp, as he took in the surroundings. Evelyn's expression remained calm, but inside her mind raced. "You don't control the elevator maintenance schedules. You don't control the technology," she thought. But she also knew that she couldn't play her hand too early. There had to be something else. Her training, her experience, it was all leading to this moment. Her pulse quickened, but she forced herself to breathe steadily, to maintain the facade of calm. "I can't control every little thing in this building," Evelyn replied, her voice smooth, betraying no emotion. "But you've been waiting a long time, haven't you? I don't suppose this is about money anymore." Her eyes met his for a fleeting moment, enough to register the hint of annoyance in his posture. Leon stiffened. "No, it's not," he admitted. "Your family's debt. All those leveraged buyouts. You think you can bury it, but it all comes due. Your grandfather's mistakes, your father's decisions. Your empire was built on borrowed time, and now it's time to collect." His words stung more than Evelyn expected. He was right. Her grandfather's debt had been hidden away, sealed in documents that had long been forgotten by most. It had been a lingering shadow over her family's wealth, one she'd fought to keep buried. But now Leon had found it, and with it he'd found a way to take everything from her. They reached the VIP floor, and Leon led her down the long hallway toward a small, isolated conference room. It was the kind of room where business deals were made, where power and decisions were hidden behind closed doors. A leather portfolio lay on the table inside, waiting for her. Leon had prepared everything. All he needed was her signature. "Sit down," Leon instructed, his hand motioning to the chair across from the table. "Review the contract if you must, but I don't think it'll make a difference. You're going to sign it." Evelyn didn't move immediately. She stood at the door for a moment, taking in the scene, trying to slow down the rush of thoughts in her head. The contract sat there ominous and final, but Evelyn knew she had to do something. She wasn't going to let this man strip her of everything she had worked for. Slowly she crossed the room and sat her fingers brushing the edge of the leather portfolio. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, but she couldn't give in. Not yet. Leon, however, was growing impatient. "I can see you're stalling," he said, his voice colder now. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. You sign and you walk out of here with your life. You don't, and I'll make sure you don't leave at all." Evelyn's hand trembled ever so slightly as she reached for the papers, but she didn't sign them. Not yet. Instead, she began to flip through the pages, reading the clauses with deliberate slowness. Her eyes scanned the words, but her mind was elsewhere, focused on the sign she had made to Ivan, on the plan she had set in motion. Across the hotel, Ivan was still working. The quiet, invisible janitor had become her silent lifeline. He had given her hope, and now she had to rely on that hope to get her through. She turned another page, her hands steady, though her heart raced. Outside the conference room, the tension had reached its peak. Ivan, still pushing his cart down the hallway, had done everything he could to delay Leon's progress. He had activated maintenance mode on the elevator, creating just enough of a delay. He had blocked their path with his cleaning cart, moved at the right moments, and kept the hotel functioning as if nothing was wrong. But time was running out. Inside, Evelyn was stalling, but the clock was ticking. Every second that passed brought them closer to disaster. And then it happened. She finished reading the last page, her eyes quickly scanning the final line. She set the pen down, positioning it perfectly on the signature line. But she didn't write. Instead, she looked Leon in the eye and spoke, her voice steady. "Before I sign, tell me something," she said, her voice almost too calm. "How did you know about my grandfather's debt? That information was sealed 40 years ago. How did you find it?" Leon's gaze flickered for just a moment, a crack in his calm facade. Then he smiled, a cold, calculating smile that made Evelyn's skin crawl. "That's the beauty of patience," he said. "Information doesn't disappear. It's always there, waiting to be found. I've been planning this for 3 years. Every document, every secret your family buried, I found it all." Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Inside, help. It had to be. Someone within her own organization had betrayed her. Someone had fed Leon the information he needed, and now she was trapped. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. She picked up the pen again, positioning her fingers so they were just beneath the table. She signed, but not in the way Leon expected. She signed for help. Her fingers formed the words in the silent space between them. "Help now. Close." In the hallway outside the conference room, Ivan's heart hammered in his chest as he watched through the decorative glass panel. He saw her fingers move, saw the subtle sign. He didn't hesitate. He stood, grabbed a metal tool tray, and dropped it with a loud crash. The noise rang through the hallway, cutting the silence like a knife. Leon's head snapped toward the door. He had been so focused on Evelyn, so certain that he had won, that he didn't see it coming. He spun around just as the door to the conference room opened, but before he could react, Evelyn had already made her move. She had been watching Ivan, watching his hand signals through the glass, and when Audrey and the officers burst through the door, Evelyn dropped beneath the table just as Ivan had instructed. In the seconds that followed, chaos erupted. Leon reached for his weapon, but the officers were already moving. They had the advantage. The carefully laid plan was coming to fruition, and in the chaos it was Ivan, the man who had been invisible for years, who had become the difference between life and death. The hallway was eerily silent, save for the faint hum of the overhead lights and the muffled voices coming from the security offices below. In the conference room, Leon's eyes darted back and forth, scanning the room in a moment of confusion. The sound of the metal tray clattering against the floor had been enough to shatter his calm, but it was the sudden change in Evelyn's demeanor, the way she had dropped to the floor, that made him realize something was wrong. Down came the silent command from across the room, the words signaled in the swift practiced movements of Evelyn's hand hidden beneath the table. She hadn't signed the contract. She had signed her hope for salvation. For just a moment, Leon hesitated, his mind caught between the urgency of his mission and the confusion of what was happening around him. He had expected a calm, smooth resolution, Evelyn signing away her legacy, signing over her power, her future. Instead, there was chaos. There was resistance. And his grip on the situation was slipping. The officers, moving with the precision and quiet confidence of trained professionals, rushed into the room. But they weren't the only ones moving. Evelyn had been waiting for this moment, every second of the silent conversation between her and Ivan leading to this exact moment. As the officers entered, she shot a look at Ivan's reflection in the glass panel outside the door. The janitor had seen it all. He was the key, and now it was time for the plan to unfold. Stay calm, Audrey's voice echoed in Ivan's ear through the radio, sending a jolt of energy through his body. The plan was in motion, and there was no turning back now. Outside the conference room, Ivan didn't wait for orders. He'd done his job, he'd created the diversion, bought them the precious seconds they needed. The chaos of the drop tray had done its job, forcing Leon to spin to lose his focus. Now it was time to make his move. The sound of footsteps approached. It was Bridget who had been tasked with creating another distraction, keeping the lobby functioning as if nothing were wrong. She walked across the floor, her voice carrying across the room as she made casual conversation with guests. But her eyes never stopped moving, always alert. The plan was working, Leon was distracted, and the hotel was still operating as if nothing was amiss. Back in the conference room, the officers had already made their move. Leon swung his body around his hand, reaching for the weapon at his side, but before he could draw it, the officers were on him. Their presence was swift and controlled, forcing him to release the weapon in a flash of panic. He tried to fight back, but the officers were too fast, too prepared. His weapon clattered to the floor, and in a split second, Leon was on the ground, his hands restrained behind his back. "You're under arrest," one of the officers growled, his voice cold and professional. Leon thrashed, shouting about lawyers and lawsuits, but no one was listening to him anymore. Across the hallway, Ivan had taken his position by the housekeeping alcove, his body positioned in just the right spot so he could see everything that happened inside the conference room through the reflection in the glass. As the officers subdued, Ivan breathed a sigh of relief. It was over, for now at least. But the story wasn't finished. Not yet. And it wouldn't be until the entire truth came out. Minutes later, Evelyn stood in her office, her hands trembling as she spoke with the detectives. She gave her statement recounting everything that had happened, the threats, the fear, and finally, the moment when she had been saved. She explained the sign language she had used, how Ivan had read her silent plea, and responded without hesitation. The detective nodded, his expression sympathetic but professional. "You were lucky," he said. "We'll make sure this is all documented. The evidence, the security footage, everything. Leon's going down for what he did. And if there was inside help, we'll find them too." Evelyn's mind was already elsewhere. The gravity of what had just happened was settling in, but there was something else, something she had learned in those precious seconds when Ivan's signs had given her hope. She had been so focused on control, on power, on maintaining the image of a perfect empire. But that control had been an illusion. Leon's attack had proven that, and she had nearly paid the price for it. Later that evening, after the chaos had subsided and the police had escorted Leon out through the service entrance, Evelyn sat alone in her office. The quiet of the hotel was almost deafening now, and the usual hum of activity seemed distant, muffled by the weight of what she had just survived. Her phone rang. It was Ivan. "Miss Sinclair," he said quietly. "I wanted to check in. I know everything's settled, but I just wanted to say if you ever need help again." Evelyn's heart swelled with gratitude. "I don't even know how to thank you, Ivan. You saved my life today. You're not just a janitor to me anymore." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Ivan didn't seem to know what to say to that, but Evelyn could hear the hint of a smile in his voice. "I just did what needed to be done." The words lingered in the air between them. Evelyn wasn't used to being vulnerable, but in that moment she understood something she had never fully grasped before. It wasn't the money or the empire that gave her power, it was the people who stood beside her. The ones who saw the invisible, who acted when no one else would. As she hung up the phone, Evelyn made a decision. She wouldn't let this go unacknowledged. She would make things right. The following weeks were a blur of meetings and decisions. The investigation into Leon's actions continued, but Evelyn's focus had shifted. She knew that there were still shadows in her organization employees who had seen things, who had done things that no one wanted to talk about. But the truth had to come to light for her own sake, and for the sake of the hotel that had built her family's legacy. One day she called Ivan into her office. He came in looking as humble and quiet as ever. He wore his janitor's uniform, a faint dampness still clinging to it from his work earlier that morning. "Ivan," she said, standing up to greet him, "I need to thank you properly." He shook his head, his face still humble as ever. "No need for that, Miss Sinclair. I was just doing my job." Evelyn smiled, but there was a depth to her gaze. "No, you did more than that. You saved my life, and that's something I can't just brush off." There was a long pause. Ivan glanced at the floor, unsure of what was happening. Evelyn continued, "I want to offer you a new position here, something that recognizes your contributions to this hotel. Director of Employee Safety and Wellness. You'll oversee the safety programs, the things that really matter." Ivan was taken aback. "I'm just a janitor," he muttered, his voice hesitant. No, you're much more than that, Evelyn said. You saw what others couldn't see. You acted when no one else would. And that's why you're the perfect person for this job. Ivan's eyes widened in surprise. I accept. Evelyn nodded, her face resolute. Good. Because we're not just going to change things for the employees here. We're going to make sure every worker, every person who feels invisible, has someone who sees them. I'm starting a fund. A fund for families like yours, with children who have disabilities. You'll be part of it. Ivan was speechless. For the first time in years, he could feel a sense of pride. Pride in his work, pride in who he was, and pride in what he had done. Months passed and the new system was put in place. A plaque was unveiled in the lobby of the Crestwood Elite Hotel, detailing the new silent alert system for employees in danger. The plaque was named in honor of Lily Henry Ivan's daughter, and the work he had done to make sure that no one else would ever be overlooked again. Evelyn stood next to Ivan and his daughter during the ceremony, watching as the plaque was unveiled. She signed to Ivan her fingers, speaking the words she couldn't say aloud. Thank you. You changed everything. As Matilda watched her father, her eyes wide with pride, Evelyn realized that the greatest power she had wasn't in her empire, her wealth, or her control. It was in her ability to create a future where everyone could thrive, not just the ones at the top. The world was changing, and Evelyn Sinclair, the once untouchable CEO, was finally learning how to be a true leader.